March 12, 1979. A home movie recorded in Coldwater, Maine. The Harlow family was preparing for their youngest child's birthday. Balloons, a cake, laughter in the background, nothing unusual, until the tape kept running after the camera was set down. What happened next would be studied by investigators, dismissed by skeptics, and buried by the town for more than 40 years. The reel you're about to hear was recovered from a sealed evidence box marked "Do Not Restore." It begins with the sound of a door opening. You can hear a man calling to someone off-screen. A woman answers, but her voice seems to come from the wrong direction. The camera tilts toward the stairs, catches a flash of movement, then freezes. The next 23 seconds are completely silent. When the film resumes, the family is gone. Only the dining room remains, untouched. Plates on the table, candles still burning. Authorities ruled it an accident. The house was boarded up. For decades, it stood empty on the hill, a dark shape against the fog that settles over Coldwater each winter. But locals remember the night the power went out across the entire county. At the exact moment, the last Harlow tape stopped recording. They remember the search teams that refused to enter after sunset. The reports of lights in the windows long after the electricity had been shut off. The way the air around the property still carries a faint electrical hiss, as if something beneath the walls is still running. In 2024, an unlabeled box surfaced at a Maine estate auction. Inside, the original footage, a set of keys, and a letter with no signature. Only a single sentence. Please finish what we started. Tonight, we open that box. We will follow every record, every surviving witness, every piece of evidence that points to what really happened inside the Harlow house. The following audio and video materials are genuine. They had not been altered beyond basic restoration for clarity. What you hear next is the sound that made even the original investigators stop the playback and leave the room. If you listen carefully, beneath the static, there's another voice, a whisper that seems to know your name. Coldwater, Maine. Population 4,712. A quiet town surrounded by miles of pine forest and river marshland. The kind of place where nothing ever makes the news. In the center of town stands what locals call the Harlow property. 2 acres, white clapboard house, built in 1893 by a man whose name has been carefully removed from nearly every surviving record. The few blueprints that exist show an ordinary Victorian layout until you start comparing them. Every version measures differently. Some show a hallway that ends abruptly. Others mark entire rooms that appear in one set of drawings and vanish in the next. No official inspection was ever completed. The house passed through the Harlow family line without sale or documentation until 1979. That year, Dr. Eleanor Harlow, a clinical psychologist, inherited the property from her father. She moved in with her husband, Thomas, and their 3 children, Peter, age 14, Rebecca, 11, and Abigail, 9. They lived there less than 8 months. The footage you saw in the opening minutes, that tape, was recorded in March of that year. The device used was a JVC portable camcorder, model 3100. Only 2 copies of that specific recording were ever confirmed. One submitted to Coldwater Police as evidence, and the other found sealed inside the basement wall during renovation decades later. Investigators at the time noted something unusual. The film stock was partially melted, as if it had been exposed to extreme heat. But the footage plays without interruption. When the original team viewed it, several members reported hearing sounds not captured on the official audio track. The file logs describe faint additional dialogue. But when isolated and enhanced, that dialogue didn't match any of the known voices in the family. A voice analysis later compared the sample to background speech from the earlier portion of the tape, and found an anomaly. The unidentified voice was responding to the family's conversation in real time. A long pause, the faint hum of tape reels turning. For years, researchers dismissed this as a playback illusion, a phenomenon caused by overlapping analog sound frequencies. But the problem is, the same voice appears in the silent portion of the recording, when the camera microphone wasn't active. When the tape was examined under spectral light, faint movement appeared in the corners of each frame, a shifting pattern near the doorframe, too regular to be a film defect. That was the first documented anomaly of the Harlow investigation, a shadow that moves when no one in the footage does. Locals have their own explanations. They say the house is built on the wrong ground, that something under the foundation was never supposed to be disturbed. The town's library records from the 1800s list the location not as residential land, but as part of the old Cold Water Tract, an area once used by early settlers for burials and rituals of protection. The last written entry about that tract reads simply, "Closed by order of the elders, nothing to be built, nothing to be returned." The Harlow family moved in on June 4, 1978. Within weeks, neighbors began reporting lights in the attic that didn't match the home's electrical pattern. Several described hearing music late at night, a piano piece that no one could identify, though witnesses claimed it came from inside the walls. These details were never included in the police reports. They were passed along quietly, retold only in private. Decades later, when those same neighbors were interviewed again, their testimonies aligned almost perfectly, down to the date and the melody. One of them, now in her 70s, recalled seeing a child's face in the upstairs window 2 weeks after the disappearance. She thought it was a trick of the light, until it smiled. What we are about to uncover isn't simply the story of a haunted house. It is the record of a family that vanished, a town that chose silence, and a piece of evidence that refuses to decay. Every frame of that tape, every document, every voice on those recordings will take us deeper into what happened inside the Harlow house. And the first step begins with the people who remember. The footage you're hearing now was never broadcast. It was archived in an unmarked envelope, catalogued only by date, March 17, 1979, 5 days before the Harlow family disappeared. The first few minutes appear ordinary. Thomas Harlow adjusts the camera, focuses on his wife as she sets plates on the table. The children run past, laughing. There's a sound of rain outside. Then, something small, easy to miss. A picture frame behind them begins to tilt, slowly, as though the wall itself is breathing. No one in the room reacts. The frame steadies, and in that reflection, for less than half a second, there's movement, a blur of light where no one stands. When analysts slowed the footage frame by frame, the reflection revealed a partial image, a shoulder, a hand, and the edge of a face looking directly into the camera lens. The Harlows never seemed to notice. In the following segments, other details begin to emerge. The temperature readings from the original police notes show an abrupt drop inside the living room, recorded at 48 degrees Fahrenheit, while the rest of the house remained at 72. The difference is impossible under normal conditions, but every time the temperature fell, something on the tape would shift. A flicker of static, a sudden audio spike, and once, a low sound almost like breathing directly against the microphone. Some described it as the sound of wind moving through a hollow space. Others said it was a voice. The more the footage was restored, the clearer that sound became, rhythmic, patient, timed with the movements of whoever was closest to the camera. Dr. Harlow herself seems to react once. She glances toward the lens, frowns, and whispers something under her breath. When the volume is raised, the words form a phrase. It's still watching. That line, the only direct acknowledgement on record, was followed by the final 20 seconds of the reel. A shadow moves across the dining room floor, stretching in the wrong direction compared to the light source. Then the audio cuts entirely. In that silence, there's a single click, as if someone turned the camera off, but the time code continues to run. When it resumes, the room is empty. No family, no movement. Only the flicker of a candle in the distance, burning almost completely down to wax. Investigators later found no melted residue on the table, as if the candle had burned, but left no trace of heat. The Harlow children's voices appear faintly on the tape again, but reversed, slowed beyond normal human speech. When experts reversed the track, what came through was a phrase, clear enough to read on the waveform. "Please, close the door." The next available segment on the recovered reel skips ahead 2 days. No one appears in frame again. Only sounds remain. A clock ticking out of rhythm, footsteps crossing floorboards, and what might be the faint echo of a child's lullaby humming from another room. The melody has never been identified. The final seconds before the reel cuts to black capture something unexplainable. A deep vibration through the mic, like the house itself exhaling. Then silence. When the family vanished, the clock in that room stopped at 3:11 a.m. Every copy of the footage ends there. The question that remains: who was holding the camera when the recording continued? The next file in the archive isn't a video. It's an interview, one that the town never wanted released. The final section of the recovered Harlow tape was labeled "Do Not View." It was stored in a sealed envelope, marked only with a single initial, E. For decades, no one could determine what that stood for. Some believed it meant evidence. Others said it was Eleanor. When restoration began in 2024, the first few seconds appeared blank, just visual snow, no sound. But once the magnetic data was resynced, faint images emerged. A narrow hallway, light bleeding through the edges of the frame, pulsing in a slow rhythm. And then, a voice, low, close to the mic, whispering one word: Abigail. The timestamp shows this was recorded at 3:09 a.m., 2 minutes before every clock in the house stopped. What follows lasts less than 30 seconds, but it has become the most studied piece of domestic footage in Maine state archives. The lens turns toward the end of the hall. There's a door, slightly ajar. Inside, faint movement. A child's voice calls, "Mom?" Dr. Harlow's reply is distant, muffled, as if coming from somewhere beneath the floorboards. Then, without warning, every light source in frame flares at once, overexposing the image into white. When the light fades, the hallway is empty. The camera drifts forward slowly, soundless except for the breathing of whoever is filming. The door ahead creaks wider. Inside, a child's bed, sheets half pulled, one pillow on the floor. The camera pans to the wall. On the plaster, written in what appears to be charcoal or soot, a single line. "Do you see me now?" There is no recorded movement of a hand, no sign that anyone wrote it during filming. The letters simply appear, one after another, as if being traced by air itself. At 26 seconds in, a small shape crosses the bottom of the frame. It's the shadow of a child, but inverted. While the figure moves left, its shadow moves right. Analysts who frame match this moment found something deeply wrong. The shadow belongs to a child shorter than Abigail Harlow by nearly half a foot. The recording ends in complete silence. The very last frame, a close-up of the wallpaper, torn slightly at one corner, revealing something behind it. A photograph. The image is faint, discolored by time, but the outline is unmistakable. A family portrait. The Harlows, standing in front of the house. But when the photo is compared to official prints from the same year, one detail stands out. There's an extra person. A figure standing in the window behind them. The face is featureless. The reflection of the camera lens rests exactly where its eyes should be. After that frame, the reel snaps. The tape ends mid-sound, a noise that starts like a low breath, then cuts to black. Technicians noted the tape didn't tear from pressure. It stopped itself. Forensic analysts called this mechanical interference. But the repair log from that session notes something strange. When they tried to splice the tape back together, the cut had already fused. The film stock had melted just enough to seal on its own. Yet the room temperature at the time was recorded as 59 degrees. What the footage shows, and what it refuses to show, became the foundation of what investigators later named the cold water phenomenon. The idea that certain recordings, once made, begin to record more than the world around them. They begin to record what's waiting just outside it. And in the case of the Harlow tape, whatever was waiting answered back. After viewing this, the original police archivist sealed the film away and filed a report marked unusable evidence. Within a month, the Harlow family's property deed was quietly removed from public record. No one in Coldwater would speak on record again for 45 years. Until now. After the Harlow tape was sealed, it was moved into long-term storage at the Coldwater County Evidence Facility. There it sat for nearly 5 decades, untouched, unlogged, and without a case number. No official record explains why. The surviving reports from 1979 mention only inconclusive visual data. The officer assigned to catalog the material, Sergeant Daniel Ross, resigned the following week. His letter of resignation reads, "I cannot listen to that voice again." No further explanation was ever filed. By the time researchers reopened the Harlow case in 2024, much of the evidence had decayed. Photographs clouded, documents stuck together from moisture. But one object remained perfectly preserved. The keyring found in the same box as the tape. Each key belonged to a different door within the Harlow house, labeled only by scratches, not tags. The third key, however, had a small marking on its edge. There were only 4 bedrooms in the original blueprint. When the team returned to the property, that key fit a door no one remembered seeing before. The frame was narrow, part of the east hallway that had been sealed with drywall during renovation. Behind it, a stairway descending into concrete darkness. The air inside was still, cold and dry, untouched for decades. And at the bottom of those steps, resting on the floor, was a child's shoe. Size 6. The same model sold in Coldwater in 1979. The serial tag matched a purchase receipt from Dr. Eleanor Harlow, dated 2 days before the disappearance. There were no other remains. The item now sits in evidence again, locked inside a glass case at the Maine State Historical Archive. Visitors report that when they approach the case, motion sensors trigger, though there is no movement in the room. The light above flickers once and steadies. The curator says it happens only when the building is empty, because in every town like Coldwater, there are people who remember too much, and some of them, even now, refuse to live within sight of that hill. The question that remains is not what happened to the Harlows, it's who keeps unlocking their door. Coldwater, Maine. Population, small enough that everyone knows the names on every mailbox. Ask any resident about the Harlow family, and most will pause before answering. Some shake their heads, others change the subject. It's not anger, it's avoidance. The house on the hill is visible from almost anywhere in town, but for 40 years, no one has photographed it. Even the local map, the one printed by the county every 10 years, leaves that section blank. It's listed as private land, unavailable. When asked why, one official said quietly, "It's always been that way." A soft, steady tone begins beneath the voice, like the low hum of telephone wires. Coldwater has one school, one diner, one fire station, and a post office that still hand stamps letters. The people here don't believe in legends, they believe in history. And in Coldwater's history, the name Harlow appears only twice, once in a birth record and once in a missing persons report. Nothing in between. Sound, the creak of an old door, faint footsteps. The documentary crew began its investigation here at the Coldwater Historical Society, a narrow building on the edge of Main Street. The curator, Mrs. Marin, had been the assistant librarian in 1979. She agreed to speak on record, but only under one condition, that the interview be conducted after dark when the building was closed. Her voice is quiet, almost apologetic. "People remember the wrong parts," she says. "They think it was the house that went bad, but that place was always bad. The Harlows just moved into it." She hesitates before continuing. "The night they disappeared, every clock in town stopped. Mine did too, for exactly 3 minutes. When it started again, the second, hand jumped forward like time had skipped. Nobody talked about it. We just let it pass." When asked if she'd ever seen the Harlows, she nods slowly. They seemed happy. The children were polite. But there was something about the mother. She would stop and listen, like she was waiting for someone to answer her. A faint sound, the rustle of papers. Mrs. Marin brings out a stack of old town newsletters. There's an announcement for a neighborhood picnic in June of 1978, hosted by the Harlow family. The event was cancelled the same week it was printed. The reason is handwritten in the margin. Postponed, property unsafe. No follow-up issue ever mentions it again. Mrs. Marin lowers her voice when she mentions the children. People used to hear them playing near the edge of the woods after they were gone. You'd be walking home, and you'd hear laughter, but no one was there. Some of us thought it was just echoes. Sound carries strange over the river. Then she looks toward the darkened window. but sometimes the laughter would stop the second you looked up. The audio from that interview captures 3 distinct knocks on the window behind her. Neither she nor the interviewer react. When the tape is reviewed later, the timestamp shows the knocks occurred at 3:11 a.m. The same minute every clock in the Harlow house stopped in 1979. Mrs. Marin ends her interview with one final line. "If you want to understand what happened to them, don't start with the house. Start with the town. We built it wrong." Coldwater's records suggest the town was founded in 1768, but that's not true. The land was already occupied. What happened before Coldwater was built is the part no one ever wrote down. And somewhere in those missing years lies the first name to ever be erased from its history. The man who designed the Harlow house. His story begins next. The Harlow family wasn't Coldwater's first disappearance. In the archives beneath the town hall, 3 earlier cases were found. All families who left no forwarding address, no sale records, no sign of travel. Each had lived within 1 mile of the Harlow property. Their homes were eventually torn down, their land reclassified as unusable terrain. None of the demolition permits exist anymore. The mayor at the time, Harold Kinney, gave a single radio interview about the Harlow case in 1980. His voice, grainy and distant, plays over static. "People need to move on. We can't keep talking about ghosts. The family's gone, that's all there is." When asked whether the town had sealed off the house, there's a pause, longer than expected. Then he adds, "It wasn't us who sealed it." The station records end there. The next hour of that broadcast was erased. The tape stops. Silence. In the town's library, a single microfilm copy of the Coldwater Gazette from 1894 remains intact. The headline reads, "Construction begins on new estate by order of Elijah Crane." The accompanying image is faint, but the outline of the structure matches the Harlow house perfectly, down to the narrow attic window that no current floor plan includes. 2 weeks later, the paper printed a retraction. Article withdrawn by request of the Crane family. No such property to be built. But the foundation had already been poured. The original surveyor's notes, preserved in ink faded almost to nothing, mention something unusual. Rock unsuitable, subsoil hollow, voices when struck. That phrase appears again in 3 other inspection logs across the next 50 years, always tied to the same location. Coldwater's history doesn't simply skip the Harlow name. It rearranges itself around it. Property lines shift between printings. Maps from the 1920s show a pond where the house should be. The 1950s version replaces it with woodland. In 1978, the pond reappears again, though it hasn't existed for over a century. When modern drones mapped the property, they found a depression in the earth directly behind the house. The same shape, the same size. The deeper the investigation went, the more the town itself seemed to resist it. Files vanished from digital servers. 2 archivists reported hearing a phone ring in the closed office. An old rotary model no longer connected to any line. When one picked it up, she heard a child's voice ask, "Is my mother there?" The call cut off instantly. No caller ID. No recording on the line. The next interview came from a former sheriff's deputy, Thomas Delaney, who worked the original 1979 case. He agreed to speak only off camera. His voice, brittle and dry, comes through the tape recorder. "We searched that place for 2 days. I don't remember how it ended. I remember walking out, and it was daylight. Someone told me to go home. When I came back the next morning, The house was locked again, like it had never been opened. I tried to tell people, but the reports were already written. Someone else had signed my name. When asked who, he answers, "I don't know, but it wasn't my handwriting." Later, that same deputy was found wandering the edge of Coldwater Forest. He said he was following the light. There were no lights reported that night. The pattern was becoming clear. The closer anyone looked at the Harlow case, the less they remembered afterward. Every account ends the same way, with silence and missing time. Which leads to a question no one has been willing to ask directly. If the house is just a house, what is it that keeps rewriting Coldwater's history to protect it? The answer, if it exists, may be buried with the man who built it. The deeper researchers went into Coldwater's archives, the less sense the dates began to make. Building permits, death certificates, even weather records, all correct at first glance, until you compared them. In one file, the blizzard that struck Maine in 1979 happened in March. In another, the same event is dated in July. Photographs taken weeks apart show the same snowdrifts, the same footprints. No one could explain it. The town clerk called it clerical confusion. But a single name kept appearing on the signatures at the bottom of these altered documents: E. Crane. The same initials found on the envelope that held the forbidden footage. The team requested access to private archives stored in the basement of the First Parish Church. Most of the boxes contained parish rosters, donations, letters. But one small folder, marked Restricted, Cemetery Division, held something else. A map, older than the town itself. It showed Coldwater's original land division before the church was built. The outline of the current streets was there, but so were several others, faint, like they'd been erased and redrawn. In the corner, a set of symbols, a circle intersected by a square, and a line running through both. Written beneath it, in faint ink, "Foundation complete, Harlow tract, sealed." The date beside the signature, 1776, nearly 2 centuries before the Harlow family moved in. That night, the church's motion sensors triggered at 3:11 a.m. The camera footage shows the inside of the archive room. No people. Only one box on the table. The same box that had held the map, shaking gently for 3 seconds, then sliding 1 inch to the left. No wind, no vibration. The sensors reset. The following morning, when the research team returned, every page from the map folder was gone, replaced with blank paper. The only thing left was a note scrawled across the cover in fresh pencil. "Stop drawing the lines." No fingerprints were found. One witness, the church caretaker, later described hearing a knock on the basement door around that same hour. When he opened it, there was no one there. Just the sound of a woman's voice from down the hall saying, "They've started digging again." He followed the voice toward the records room, but when he entered, it was silent. On the floor were faint, muddy footprints, leading directly to the locked cabinet that once held the Harlow case files. The pattern of those prints, bare feet, too small for an adult, and in one of the shallow impressions, a partial outline of the number 5. The same marking carved on the forgotten key found in the basement of the Harlow house. The more the town tried to forget, the more its history began to correct itself. The name Harlow has reappeared on Coldwater's public registry 3 times in the past year. Once on a property deed, once on a death notice, and once on a birth certificate. All signed by the same attending physician, E. Crane. The house was built to keep something buried. The town was built to keep it forgotten. But both are failing. And what the records now suggest is that the one who began it, the architect, may have never left at all. Before cold water, before the streets and houses, the land had a name: Crane's Hollow. Surveyors' maps from 1765 show it as an uneven stretch of forest and marshland, crisscrossed with streams that no longer exist. There are markings in the corners of the map, not symbols anyone today recognizes, circles intersecting with lines, and small triangles drawn over the marshes. Nothing explains them. The earliest records speak of a man named Elijah Crane, the architect behind what would become the Harlow House Foundation. He arrived in the area in 1768, carrying surveying tools, journals, and a single large chest no one knew the contents of. Crane's journals described the land as restless and listening, and in one entry he notes, "The soil remembers the ones who walked before. It speaks when we ignore it." Modern archaeologists have confirmed signs of human settlement dating back hundreds of years, long before any European colonists arrived. Pottery shards, stone tools, even traces of fire pits are scattered directly beneath the Harlow House site. In Crane's own writing, he mentions an agreement with the town elders of that time. "This tract shall remain undisturbed, or the echoes will rise. Those who forget shall pay in blood." The land itself seems to be the earliest witness to the events that would follow. Residents in the surrounding area have reported odd occurrences for centuries. One family, the Whitmores, lived on the northern edge of Crane's Hollow in 1822. In their diary, they wrote, "The pond sings at night. We do not go near it after sunset. We hear footsteps that are not ours." By the time the first Harlow moved in, the land had a history of vanishings, disappearances, and unexplained deaths. Modern surveys of the property reveal irregularities in the soil, depressions that have no natural explanation, shadows that appear on infrared scans without heat signatures, and plant life that refuses to grow in certain patches, as if something beneath the ground prevents it. One of Crane's notes, hidden in the margin of his ledger, reads, "I built the foundation not for a house, but for the guardian. It must not be disturbed." Every structure that has existed there since 1768 sits atop that original foundation, including the Harlow House in 1979. The land remembers, and it waits. Archaeologists, historians, and locals all agree on one thing: no human disturbance is tolerated lightly. When the Harlow family moved in, they unknowingly became part of a centuries-old warning. Every choice, every alteration to the land, however small, carried consequences. And the first signs of those consequences would appear the very first week they arrived. The Harlows arrived on the edge of Crane's Hollow in late August 1979. Their neighbors warned them to respect the land. They laughed it off. But the warnings were not empty. Within days, the house itself seemed to reject them. Floorboards creaked without cause, doors slammed in empty hallways, windows that were tightly closed rattled as if someone breathed against the glass. In their journals, the family noted small but strange occurrences. The attic door opens on its own. Nothing is inside. We hear whispers at night. Footprints in the garden in the morning. We were alone all night. The pond reflects the house, but sometimes there is a figure that isn't any of us. Even the pets reacted. Dogs would freeze at certain corners. Cats refused to enter rooms that smelled faintly of damp earth. though the basement was dry. Town records reveal that the Harlows were not the first to experience this. The Whitmores, 2 generations prior, had noted the same disturbances. Doors moving, furniture shifting, strange reflections in windows, shadows that do not belong to anything living. Archaeologists visiting the property decades later discovered that the disturbances correlated with specific areas of the land: the northeast corner, the pond, and the original foundation beneath the house. Soft dripping water echoing like a leaky pipe. One particularly chilling entry from the Harlow diary reads, "I saw a hand press against the window from the outside. The yard was empty. No one came in or out. I don't know if it was real or if I imagined it, but it watched me." On the nights the Harlows wrote these entries, neighbors reported hearing low, irregular banging in the house, walls vibrating as if someone was digging inside. When a local historian visited, he refused to enter certain rooms. He later described it as, "There is a pressure there, a presence. You can't see it, but you know it's aware of you." The tension was compounded by the town's response. Officials insisted there was nothing unusual. Some residents refused to speak of the Harlow house entirely, whispering warnings. "If you go inside, don't touch the walls. Don't leave a mark. It notices everything." But the family, like anyone curious, began to push boundaries. They renovated, moved furniture, dug in the garden, unaware that the land itself was recording each action. Late one night, the youngest Harlow, a boy of 7, wrote a note in his journal. "The land is talking. I hear it when I sleep. It wants us gone." The next morning, the family found the note placed outside the front door. No one had touched it. Small things became large things. Shadows moved independently of light. Sounds preceded events. And the pond, that reflection of the house, began showing images that no one could explain. Faces of people long gone. Figures walking across land that no longer existed. The Harlows were not just living on cursed soil. They were living inside history itself. A history that was still angry, still waiting. The